In this episode, we're going to look at the first of two Pioneer CTF1250s that I received in for service. This one here, the complaint is, press play and it shuts down. So let's get started and see what's wrong with this one. Before I start with today's video, I just wanted to show you guys my new test amp that I've got. Gone is the old piece of crap Pioneer, which never was balanced because one channel was always louder than the other. And the volume control was always cutting in and out, and generally it was a piece of Pioneer crap. So what I've put in place is this nice Akai CTF1250 that I worked on the other day, or a couple of videos ago. This is a piece that came out of that estate that I was collecting garbage from. Got two pieces from it. One is the ATK110 tuner, and the other is the amplifier. This unit sounds nice on my PSB speakers. I've got the tuner and the phono input. Got a phono line right here that I can plug into a turntable. I've got my tape 1 and tape 2 inputs. Actually, I only have one input. I have the tape 1 input, which is for working on tape decks, but I can do like a tape 2 to 1 dub. So if I want to play output from my from tape deck I've repaired and have it play out on actually tape 1 to 2 dub, sorry, play out on the line output that I can plug into the camera. I can select that, and that way I can also monitor what's being fed back in through the speakers and record it onto the camera. And then of course the source input, I've got my auxiliary, which is my MP3 player, tuner on tuner, and phono on phono. And this unit sounds fantastic. Anyway, that's my test amp now, and that's going to remain my test amp for a while until I find something better. It's heavier than the other one. It sure makes the shelf sag a bit. Shelf's not going anywhere though. It's 3/4 inch angle brackets, which are about 1/8 of an inch thick, screwed into the 2x6 studs and on a piece of plywood. So the angle brackets actually come down like this and go out like that at the bottom. So it's up against the wall. So the forces from this is actually pulling on the steel angle brackets, which are screwed right into the 2x6 stud. So this thing's not going anywhere. The shelf could probably hold 100 pounds. In this episode, Pioneer CTF1250 3-head cassette deck, direct loading. The complaint on this one, I've got two decks in from the same client. Complaint on this one is it sometimes stops during playback, and the faceplate is a bit loose. So it says here, where is it? Where's the faceplate loose? Faceplate loosening. It needs re-gluing apparently. So, oh yeah, the faceplate's coming off a bit on one side here. Okay, so this one here, apparently it's got a playback problem. Let's plug it in and see what it's doing before we pull the top off of it. Okay, unit's powered up. Maximum cassette length, 90 minutes. Is what he's got on here. We'll take a look at the transport. And I'll put in my tape that I always test unknown equipment with and see what it does. So let's... it's not playing. The tape is moving. Well, it's actually not even moving. Fast forward works. Rewind works. But the tape is not moving. The capstan shafts are turning. Wait a minute. Oh, this one's not turning. That might be the reason why this capstan shaft is turning, but the other one's not. Where's the button on here to sense that there's a tape? Oh, there it is. So this capstan is not being driven. So as a closed loop capstan, there should be a belt driving this capstan shaft from this other one. I mean, it turns freely, but it's not being driven. And if you look, you'll see that the pinch roller here is turning, and this shaft is moving. but this one's not. That would explain why the tape's not playing. Let's pull the top off and see what's broken, likely a belt. Well, these screws are torqued in so tight that my cordless driver won't even break the tension on them. So we'll be removing the screws on this one, at least breaking the tension manually on here, because these screws are all torqued in really quite tight. So a 1250 is a direct drive turntable, much like my JVC and my Technics RSM275. It's got a direct drive capstan motor, and the second capstan is driven by a belt, and indeed that belt is broken. You can see the belt that's missing right down there. Right? So this is just got a small flywheel because the main flywheel is the main motor, and you can see the belt is broken. So we got to start by changing that belt. To change the belt on this unit, first thing I need to do is remove the faceplate. So we're going to remove the screws on the top and bottom of the faceplate. Three screws on the top and 3 on the bottom, as we need to access the actual mechanism. It's easier to do this on these ones if you remove the mechanism from the unit itself. Once the screws are removed, the faceplate lifts away. As you notice, there's no need to remove the knobs. That gets the bezel out of the way. We can put that aside. And next, we'll remove the chassis. To do that, there's 7 screws in the front and 2 in the bottom that need to be removed, and then the deck will lift right out. Now some of these screws are metal screws and some are plastic screws that go into the plastic up top. So you gotta remember which screws go where. We'll remove the tape retainer. This just pops out of here. It's clipped in and there is a spring on this, so you gotta be careful when you remove it that you don't lose the spring. I get nervous whenever I deal with any plastic like this, right? Because this plastic does get brittle. And you don't want to break it, that's for sure. There, it comes out just like that on that side. And we can lift this down and remove the spring from here. And then lift the spring out. Spring clips into that hole. This just makes removal of the transport a little bit easier to do, and it's usually easier if you do it up on its side as well. Got to remove the LED socket, and the deck will lift out of the way. some wires that are caught underneath here. Just free up those wires. Space to work on these is kind of limited because the connections don't unplug. They're soldered down for most cases. There are some plugs that plug in, but a lot of them are soldered down. Like the heads, for example, they're connected down to the main board here, and they're soldered in place. So you can't really remove those wires to work on them. So, like this, a lot of times you got to work on it in place. First things first, I'm going to remove the real hub brake plate. So that's the metal plate that applies the brakes to the hubs to stop the tape. And how it's done is there's a spring. I'm going to pull the spring down out of its catch, release the spring, and then the brake glide plate will just lift out of the way. Next, we'll remove the take-up hub. There's a cap that comes off here, and then there's a washer underneath it. Take the cap off. This is a critical part. I'm covering it up here because I don't want to lose any parts as it comes apart. The top does pop off like that. And then there's a washer underneath here that holds this in place, which we have to take off. And then this will come apart because there is a belt underneath here that's got to be changed out. So let me just grab a jeweler's screwdriver to lift that washer out of the way. There's the cut washer. Put that for safekeeping. And now the hub will lift off. And there's a belt behind here that we're going to change out. So I've got a belt kit for this. So let me just get that first belt. This is the belt for the sensor for the tape counter. So that's the first belt that has to be replaced. Gonna fish the belt over a pulley up here. There's a pulley in here for the tape counter. It's up top here. Right in here. And now the belt will drop out. Nope, it won't because I'm still hung up on the pulley. It's gonna be fun getting this belt back in here. That's for sure. There, now the belt is out. Okay, that's one belt. Let's get the new belt in place. Belt actually seems okay, but I've got a new one to replace it with. Keep in mind I am going to cut some of this out where my hands and stuff are in the way. This was a little more involved than it appears on camera to fish that belt in. But it wasn't that bad, but it just took a while. It's hard to see the pulley even from where I am. Never mind you guys trying to imagine where it is, but it's in behind this little switch. And I think I've got the belt over the pulley now. Might be over that pulley now. Yeah, it is. Okay, good. So I've got the belt in place. Now I can put the idler, or the take-up hub, back in place and pull the belt around the pulley on here. And careful not to lose the washers that go in behind here. The key here is I have to fish the belt over top of the pulley on the take-up hub. I got it in place. And yes, I do. Okay, that belt's in place. If you guys can see it or not, but see the optical sensor back here rotating? You can see the light. Shine the flashlight right in here. That's the optical sensor on the back. So now I can put the cup washer back on and put on the hub for the reel. Put the cup washer back on there if it'll stay on. I always get nervous when I have to work on these things because they're so darn easy to lose if they don't go on right. But the cut washer's in place, it's holding the reel in place, or the hub in place, and I can snap back on the top. There, that's one belt replaced. I got to replace the main belt down here, which runs around this motor. That's the second belt that's got to be replaced on this one. And we're going to change out this tire as well. So I've got a tire for it in this belt kit. The guy that owns this ordered belt kits for it, so I've got the belt, or I've got the tire here, and here's the second belt. This is for the main drive. So we'll change this one next. So to do this one, I'll just remove it from the pulley itself, just like that. Pull it around and lift it out the top. Just like that. And this belt here also seems like it's got lots of life left in it. Put this belt in through the side here over the motor. And I should be able to grab it and pull it around the idler. Just like that. That one's real easy to put that belt in. That's belt number 2 done. Third thing I'm going to change is the idler, as we have an idler for it as well. Should just slip out of here. Got a finger on here so it doesn't go flying, because you know what we like to call these things, right? We don't call them Jesus clips for nothing. Put a little clip down there. Now I can remove the idler. There is a spring behind here. We'll just make sure that the spring stays on the shaft. And now I can remove the old idler tire, which is easier if you use something like a screwdriver to pry it off. Just like this. Just work the idler off like you're changing a car tire with a tire iron. No different. Pry off the old tire and apply the new tire the same way. Yeah, I tell you, this is not an easy one to change, to get that clip back on. So the next one I will do it without removing this and save myself a lot of aggravation getting the stupid clip back on, because that was fun. Because the mechanism is awkward to work on, as you're moving it, this thing is moving back and forth, right? So to try to, it's just, and you got to align the. It's got that spring that pushes forward, of course, so if you let go of it, you're going to have parts flying everywhere, which is never fun to try to find if you drop parts. But on the back side, there is a toothed clutch assembly where the fingers have to lock in like this, and the spring is pushing it forward. So if you're not lined up, you can't push the idler back far enough to expose the clip. Expose the ring here to put the clip into the groove. So my advice is don't take the idler off, unless you're looking for some serious aggravation, as I just spent like literally the last 20 minutes fighting this thing and cursing. You couldn't really see a hell of a lot because I had my hands, I had my hands in here like this to prevent the clutch from coming apart, so you couldn't see what I was doing, so there was not really any point in showing it other than the fact that I was cursing like a drunken sailor to get the stupid thing back together. So the next one, it won't come apart. We'll do it without removing that, and that'll be a different procedure on that unit, because I have another one that I'll be doing the same thing on, but we'll do it differently for that one. Okay, so that part's done. Finally, there's the main capstan belt. We're going to remove the bracket here for the back side of the assembly. There's 5 screws that come out of this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that will allow me to remove the motor bracket assembly and gain access to the capstan motor to change the belt. So here's the 5 screws coming out of this. Okay, now the back plate assembly will lift off the motors, exposing the motors themselves so that I can get access to the belt to change it. The belt here is basically broken in pieces and it's turned to goo. Yuck. I gotta remove that and clean that mess off. I think it's only gooed in one place on the actual motor itself. Okay, first thing I gotta do is gotta remove the remnants of the old belt that's on here. It's not completely turned to mush, but it's certainly, well, I guess it has turned to mush. Wonderful. Yeah, this is melted, this belt. I always love it when this happens. It always makes for a fun cleanup, if you know what I mean. Mushy belts. Right. So I'm just cleaning it up with isopropanol alcohol and a Q-tip. And we've got pretty much all of it off. Everything's off the surface at the belt contacts. So it's now, as you can see, is as clean as probably it's going to get. There's a little bit of debris down here in the edge, but I don't think I'm going to be able to get that out of there. It's kind of down in a groove, but the belt doesn't make contact with that anyway. Maybe I can scoop it out here with a screwdriver. That's probably as clean as I'm going to get it. I've got to remove a couple screws. There should be a spring behind one of these screws here. Got to be careful. I need to be able to slip the belt over the pulley and then around onto the other shaft over here. We also will lubricate these shafts while we're at it. Got some lubricant here, some super lube that came with the kit. It's a synthetic grease with PTFE. This is what came with the kit. We're going to use this to lubricate the mechanism itself. So for this one, we're going to remove these screws here. Just loosen this one off. There is a spacer underneath here that I got to be careful. If I take the screw all the way out, I'll lose that spacer, or it could drop out. So we'll just loosen this off. Enough to lift this out all the way. There we go. Okay, I'm going to put some lubricant on the bearing here. We'll put the new belt around the flywheel. The belt around there. Put some of the new lubricant onto the end of the bearing here. And then I can reassemble. slip the belt over. The pulley. Like that. Drop it back into place. Screw back in place. There we go. Now the second capstan shaft spins freely. That the pings you hear in the background is an acquaintance in Ontario that's complaining about the 48 centimeters of snow that they just got. I'm laughing. Because, of course, we got none, right? They got 48 centimeters of snow in one day, and we have none. So, I think it's hilarious. Always like to give the folks back east a bad time that it's spring here. Here we are, like, January 18th here, and it's pretty much spring. It's like, I don't know, it's about, I guess, about 9 degrees Celsius out here today, 9 or 10. It's pretty warm. It's, I call it beach weather, because, people were laughing at us at Christmas because we had our little dump of snow here, but it's long gone now. It's springtime here on the wet coast. There's another bearing that is greased on this side. It's 6 down. I don't know if you guys can see it or not, but it's right down there. We're going to put some grease on that. That's for the second capstan shaft. So we'll put some grease right into the middle of that bearing as well to lubricate it. All I can say is, sucks to be you. I can't even fathom how much snow that is. The car is literally buried up almost to the roof if you look at the bank. And here, grass is green. Everything's growing again. It's like spring. Okay, time to put the deck back together. I'm going to put some grease down into this mechanism assembly down here. So we'll put some grease down into here where the solenoid makes contact. And we'll also grease the solenoid at the back here. Let's get that in place, but let me get the mechanism back in first. Reinstall the screws. Just greasing the pivots for the solenoid. We'll also grease the slide plate assembly here. On both sides. And we'll put the brake assembly goes back in next. This piece slips in here, just like it came out. And we're going to grease this as well. So we're going to put some grease on the back side of this where it meets with the mechanism. So put some grease on the edges here. Not much, just a little bit. And then this goes back in place. Slide plate goes in, goes under here, like that. And then the spring holds it in place. You pull the spring back around and lock it in like that. And that's what holds that in place. So we've greased it here and over here, so that where it makes contact with the slide plate, we have grease. So now it's time to start reassembling the equipment, reassemble the deck back into the chassis. So it goes back in exactly the opposite way that it came out, just kind of like that. We'll remove that green LED just for now, just so that it doesn't get damaged. The mechanism just slips back in. Now I gotta get these wires around the back side of the chassis. As I remember, if you remember, I had to undo them before. I had to slip them around. They go underneath here like this, so that they come out from the front. And then the chassis will just slide back into place, just like that. And I can start reassembling the screws that hold the mechanism in place. I'm not going to tighten these screws in until I get them all started, and then I can deal with tightening them all up. But once they're started, then the mechanism is in the correct position. It will hold everything in place. They should all be lining up now. Now I've got the LED to put back in. So there's a green and a black wire. The green wire goes to the longer of the two. Whoops, you can't see that because I stuck my head in the way, but the anode and cathode are different length, and the green goes to the longer of the two. So it just plugs onto the end of the LED. It fits on just like that. That should make it work. Let's plug in the power and verify that it turns on, which it does. The capstans are spinning. So that goes in like that, fits onto this bracket like this. This is what holds the cassette in place. And then this fits in like this. Snaps in place. I hate working on these plastic things because I'm always scared that they're going to snap. That's in place like that. I should be able to pop a tape into it now and actually operate the unit. There's the tape goes in, and where's my rewind? There's my rewind. Forward, fast forward, rewind, and that should be play. And I guess I have to switch to the correct input on my amplifier to hear sound. There we go. Now that part's working. Let's deal with the front panel that's coming apart. I got to re-glue that. So let's take a look at that next. See what his complaint is here. I guess it's held in place probably by double-sided tape. Is probably what they did on this when they put this together, but it certainly is coming off on one side, and will need to be either re-glued or re-taped. It's coming off on this side over here too. You can see it. lifting. So don't play. On the back here, yeah, it looks like it was it held in place by glue? Looks like it was glue. Yeah, it's got glue on it. You can see it there. So I think maybe the simplest thing to do on this would be to remove it and apply some new glue, and then reset it and let it set up. The question is, how's the easiest way to get this thing off? I don't want to obviously push on it because I don't want to bend it. I guess I could push it through from the other side. I should be able to get this thing off without too much trouble. This whole front, I think, lifts off. A couple screws hold this whole nose cone on. Once I got the screws out, the bezel or the control panel lifts off, and I'll just set that aside like that for now. Okay, now I gotta work on re-gluing this front panel, which is coming apart. I gotta do the same on the other one, so it's gonna be kind of like a learning process to see how to do this, how to get this off without damaging it. Probably the reason why it's separating on this side is because when this is held in place, there's a spring, a grounding spring that pushes in here, that's pushing against, like through that hole there, it's pushing against this and providing tension this direction. That's because they want to ground this metal. So it's grounded to the chassis with this spring as part of the assembly that holds it on to ground it to the main front face. That's probably why, and the other one's separating in the same place. This is probably why this is separating, is because of the constant tension from that spring that's been pushing on it for the last 40 years. And it's causing the adhesive to fail on this side. It looks like it was a double-sided tape that they stuck on here. You can see it. You can see it right down here. It's like a double-sided tape that was stuck on this to hold this together. So I can probably put a little bit of heat on the metal here with a hairdryer or a heat gun, and that should soften the glue enough that it will remove without causing any warpage to the metal. So I'm going to get a low heat source. It'll be my heat gun, but it'll be on low. I'm going to hold it quite a ways away just to warm this up enough to see if I can break the bond on that double-sided tape so I can replace it. So I'm just going to use my heat gun and very, very slowly heat up the metal a bit, which should make the adhesive behind it soften a bit so that I can remove it. As you can see, it's coming off quite easily now, just by heating it up just a little bit. This is by no means hot, it's just warm. Well, it's fairly warm. You know, there we go. Now the glue is removed. Now I can remove the rest of this and we can reattach it. And it's just double-sided tape. That's all they've used on this. It's just, as you can see, it's just double-sided tape. So I can remove this and strip some new double-sided tape on there and stick it back down. That's the plan anyway. The key when you're using a heat gun on anything like this is, first of all, keep the heat directed where you want it. Don't let it get too hot. Just hot enough to break the adhesive bond is all you need. And keep moving your heat source and it'll come off quite nicely. The key to this is don't put any stress, like don't apply any force. I just use my fingernail to gently lift off the bezel, because it will bend, and if it bends it's never going to stick properly. You know, You want it to be completely flat. Before we continue, I want to lubricate the main capstan bearings in here. So what I'm going to do is, as you can see, I've pulled the lubricant retainer clips forward. They're like a washer that keeps the lubricant back. I'm going to put a drop of oil onto a end of a screwdriver and then dip it into the bearing here. Very, very little. We don't need much. It will soak into the bearing. These are a sintered bearing anyway, so they should have lubricant in it, but this is just to help out. It's very old, so then we can push the retainers back like that, and they will hold the lubricant up against the bearing itself. That way it won't get forward onto the tapes. There we go. So that is the bearings are now lubricated for the capstans on this unit. Good for another 100,000 miles. So I'm still cleaning off the remnants of the glue on the front faceplate. I'm using alcohol and just scraping it with my fingernail to remove it, because be careful when you're using rubbing alcohol or isopropanol alcohol. You don't want to get it on the front, because it could damage the paint, right? They've got the markings on here, so I don't want to get any onto here because it could remove the lacquer. So I'm very, very careful to just apply a little bit and then scrape it with my fingernail. That's the easiest way to pick this stuff off. So I'm just putting a strip of double-sided tape on here, and what I'll do is I'll cut it along the seam here with my scalpel so that I've got a sharp edge. I'll do the same on this side, of course leaving space for the lights to shine through. So that's one side done. We'll do the same over here, but again leaving space for where the lights go through. So this time I'll just cut it into smaller strips. Now I'll lift the top side of the adhesive backing off to expose the double-sided tape, and I'll get the stick it back on, and hopefully that double-sided tape is going to hold it. Reinstall it onto the faceplate, or onto the front panel, and reinsert the screws to hold it in place. As you can see, this spring provides a connection between the metal faceplate and the two decorative places, or decorative pieces, which are held in place by tape. One is contacting here, the other one's down there, so it provides a little bit of pressure on there all the time. So eventually I'm sure that will probably push it away again like it did originally, but hopefully it's going to be there for a good long time. It's good tape that I've used. I used a NASCO double-sided tape. This is what's like used by carpet layers and stuff. It's relatively strong stuff. So hopefully that will be all that's needed to hold that one back together. Now I can start reassembling the front faceplate on the unit itself. Just pop it on and all the buttons should line up with a little bit of coaxing. This deck is of course a quartz lock motor. It says right here, quartz lock, direct drive, 2-motor, closed loop, dual capstan. So we would expect that the speed is going to be exactly correct. This is a tape that I recorded 440 hertz because I used my guitar tuner to verify the speed. Now this was recorded on my quartz lock and certified Technics RSM 275. No speed adjustments have been attempted. This is quartz lock, and That's just my meter kind of, when it picks up other noise like wind and stuff from the fan blowing air behind me. It's got a little microphone on here that picks up everything. But as you can see, it's exactly bang on dead center. When I'm holding it up here, I'm actually picking up vibration from the unit itself. I'll just move it away. Dead center, exactly the same, exactly the correct speed. And that just proves that the deck that I recorded this on, mine is also exactly the right speed. So for any of you guys that have bought a 440 hertz tape from me, there's proof that my machine is exactly correct. Plus the fact that I've tested my machine with a factory tape, so I know it's correct when I make these tapes. I know my machine is the exact speed. It's a quartz lock like this, and here we go. Quartz lock drive unit, bang on, it never changes. That's the beauty of this system. And these were really good decks. Don't get me wrong, this CTF1250 was a fantastic deck. It was probably one of the best decks you could buy. And eat your heart out, Nakamichi, but this one will kick your ass. The only thing is it's only Dolby B. It's only a Dolby B deck. So it's not, you know, but it's old, right? My Technics deck will give this one a run for its money, even though it's only a two-head deck. The RSM275 was probably one of the best two-head decks that's ever been on the market. And it has DBX. And it's got, of course, the bias control, but you have to play around with it because it's a two-head deck. You got to make your recording and then play it back and so forth, and play around with it to set the bias. So this one here is easier to dial in. My JVC TDV1010, of course, being a three-head deck, will blow this one away any day of the week because it's not only got Dolby B and Dolby C, but it also has HX Pro headroom extension. So frequency response wise, it'll run circles around this. But for what this is a fantastic deck. One of the best tape decks that's probably ever been made is this deck here, Pioneer CTF1250. And I'm pretty much done on this one. Like, the speed is right on. We'll just take a listen to some music. Oh, I'm not quite done because I know I got to clean some controls. Take a listen. The input control for one. I'll stop the music so you can hear crackling. Of course, now you're not going to hear it, but the controls are a bit dirty. Hear the noise? So I got to clean the controls on it. We'll do our test recording, and that'll finish off this one, and then I'll be doing another one of these things. Oh, and this does have a pitch control, by the way, but you see when the quartz lock light is on, that's how we know that we're dead on. So when I'm playing this tape, for example, the calibration tape, right? I can change the pitch. When the quartz lock light is lit, it's exactly correct. Right there. Quartz locked. Dead on. As are my decks. Okay, so let's just try it out for playback. I'm going to do a recording on this as well. Sounds good. I don't need to do any adjustments. I'm not going to play around with the azimuth either. They're adjustable, right? But I'm not going to touch anything just because the guy that owns this, obviously, he's made tapes on it, and I don't want to change anything because obviously if I make any adjustments to this, I don't think it's going to be off. It's still factory set, but I don't want to make any adjustments to the azimuth on it because if he's made recordings on it, it'll just throw his own recordings off. So I'm assuming that that is correct. Let's clean the line controls on the side here. So there's two input controls. One is for the input 1 and mic, and the other is for input 2 line. Yes, that's what it is. There's two sets of inputs on the back here. Let's get the cleaner in here. We'll clean these controls up. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the tape calibration. So we'll go to the bias, and where do I adjust this? Is there a level on this? We'll start out at 0. I got to go to tape source, and I'm going to go into record. I'm going to adjust my level on my bias. Here we go. We got our adjustments here. It tells me whether my bias is high or low. So it tells me it's pointing to the plus, which means I have to increase my bias. I'll just zoom the camera in a bit so you can see. So if I increase my bias, or decrease my bias, I'm trying to get it, there we go, to both lights are out. So now my bias is set correctly. And on this tape, it's like a -4. So you can see, bias is too hot. Okay. You know what? You know what I forgot to do before doing this? I forgot to clean the heads. Let's do that first. It's not that the heads look dirty, it's just, let's clean the heads first. Just to make sure we've got a good starting point. We'll clean the heads, the capstans, and the pinch rollers. Doesn't look like they're dirty anyway, but we'll do that anyway, just to make sure that we're starting out everything clean. Okay, let's start this again. We'll put the tape in, put it in record, and adjust the bias so that the lights are out. There we go. Okay, so now we move to level, and we do the level adjustment. We're going to increase the level. It should be to where the two lights go out. Interesting. Do the bias again here. Center it. There we go. Level. There we go for the level. Get the two of them balanced. There we go. And then EQ. Adjust the EQ. This tape is an old tape, so it doesn't surprise me that it is changing ever so slightly, because it is a very old tape. It's one that's had lots of use on it, lots of hours. There we go. Okay, so we're pretty close right there. Let's do a recording. I'll go back to normal mode. We'll set our levels up here. I'll find a track and we'll make a recording and see how it sounds. Okay, I'm set up to record. I've got my little remote control for my MP3 player handy. We'll put it into record and I'll start the next track. We'll make our recording here and then we'll play this back. Once this finishes recording, we'll play this back. I can actually listen to this off tape. So there's source and there's tape. Sounding pretty good already. Source. We'll play this back and plug it right into the camera and listen to the recording once it's done. Okay, it's finished recording. Let's rewind this tape back. I zeroed it out at the beginning of the track. And we can play this one back, and I'm going to plug the camera directly in so we can hear the off-tape playback. Well, I couldn't hear a thing that was going on while I was doing that because the way this amplifier is set up, it has the 2 tape monitors on it. I have my deck plugged into tape number 1, and I have the recording output for the camera plugged into tape number 2, which worked fine on the old Pioneer system that only had 1 tape monitor. I could flip it onto tape 1 and it would send the signal coming into tape 1 out the tape 2 output. But this one doesn't. This one here, when I switch it to dub 1 to 2, well, it sends the output from tape number 1 to number 2, but it does not provide me with any sound coming back. So I don't know what's happening. Anyway, beside the point, I'll have to rewire this thing. I'll have to take the whole system down and figure out how to loop this thing through so that I can actually hear through my speakers while I'm making the recording. Otherwise, I plug it into the camera and I see the indicator on the camera showing me that it's recording, but I don't hear it. Anyway, I'm sure it sounds fine. It sounds fine through the speakers here. So this one here is done. And I think when we do the other one, instead of using double-sided tape, I will use glue, because I think I'm going to have to rework this one. That double-sided tape, as what I thought, with that spring pushing up against the edge of it here, I think that's going to become problematic. So I may have to pull this faceplate off this one and just re-glue this one with some contact cement. That's what we'll do on the other one when I get to the other one. This one isn't coming off yet, but I just get the sneaking suspicion that right down in the corner here, it's going to separate like before because of the spring that's pushing against it. So when I do the other one, we'll do it differently. I'll do the idler I'll show you the other way of doing it without removing the whole idler assembly, because that was a real nightmare for me to put back together. And if I had a nightmare putting this thing together, I can just imagine the fun that somebody who's not experienced with electronics would have putting that clutch back together. So we'll do the other one a different way. Anyway, this one's done. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you in the next one, which is going to be another one of these machines that I'm going to do, but we're going to do it differently than this one. We'll catch you later. Bye.